I love that, Bonnie.
Vicki, it's Charlene, Char's Landing here, and everyone, I invite you to all unmute and say hello. But I have a connection here. It's Bonnie and Dave. They're my family.
Char, I was just going to say, is that your Bonnie and David? I wasn't going to say that.
And then Vicki, you came here one time. Do you remember you brought?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I wasn't gonna explain the connections unless you wanted to. Yes, I did.
Oh, please, right? Now we see Mom and Dad too. So welcome everyone. It's really nice to see everyone. So I'm just Zoom producing here, but Karl's there moderating, and Derek is
okay. When I saw welcome Bonnie and David, I thought, is that Char's friend? So I've heard about you, Bonnie. Char talks highly about you.
She's notorious.
Yeah.
So now I get to finally see who you guys actually are and see the lovely painting you have. That's a very beautiful painting.
Thank you.
Yes, no, it's finally got to see a face. I've always heard about you guys. Char talks highly about Bonnie and David.
Yeah.
How's everything on Denman Island tonight, Bill?
Wet, I believe.
Yeah.
And you're the one that also supplies her with stuff too, I think, right? You got her. You give her curtains, didn't you, Bonnie?
Oh.
Yes.
Yes, we put them up not long ago. Me and my dad put those blinds up. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything helps. Good.
Yeah. No. You're a great help to Char and a great friend.
Yeah.
Very appreciated. And then we have William on there. Hey, William.
Hey, how's Karl doing? Haven't seen you for a while.
And it's been a while. Could I see a face? Because you sound familiar, but I can't remember. Sorry.
Gotta push the right button.
Yeah.
Because once I see faces, I'll recognize people. Hopefully.
There we go.
Hey there. Okay.
Okay. You look sort of familiar now.
Well, you've been there for a few years.
Yes, I've been doing this for a few years.
There's David and Kathy. Hello. Welcome back.
Hello from Gibson.
Hi. Wet over in Gibsons again today?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, good. Glad to know we're not the only ones.
So so we have Toronto, Victoria, Nanaimo, Calgary, William, Calgary. Now I know who you are.
Hey.
You're Guy's brother.
That's right.
Okay, it took me a while to figure that out. Once you put Calgary on, I'm like, okay.
Club Char is alive and well. Hi, William.
Char. Hey, nice to see you, Char.
Nice to be seen.
Were you wanting to sign up to read tonight, William?
No, not at all.
And then we have
All right.
Angela. I'm not going to try to pronounce the last name.
Crocker?
Crocker.
I don't want to make. Well, you never know. It could be something totally different. It might not be the way it's spelled.
It's Crocker, like Betty Crocker on a cake box.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. How are you tonight?
I'm well, thanks. Hello.
Good. Are you here just to listen to Vicki or David or?
Vicki and I know each other well, and she invited me to join you. I'm in the suburbs of Vancouver, so it's kind of fun to do a bit of traveling tonight.
Yes, it is great. You don't have to go very far.
Exactly.
You can drink wine and not have to worry about driving.
There you go. I hadn't thought that through.
I wanted to welcome everyone. We're just a couple of minutes to the top of the hour for us to begin our spoken word open mic. I'm Char, Char's Landing. Char's presents in Port Alberni, Vancouver Island, and Karl is the moderator. He's my voice, and he's keeping track of the readers list. We do have some room if anyone is interested in sharing their spoken word with us. We have a few seats available, and we'd be very happy. We offer 5 minutes. and would love to host you. And then Derek Hanebury is there. So I'm going to turn over to Karl. I just invite everyone to keep your pictures, your video on if you like. It looks better then we can see you. But I invite you to mute your microphones, and there are reactions. You can raise hands and wave and show your appreciation to all our features and our open micers, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Char. Hi. Char said my name is Karl. I'm the moderator, and I'm now going to introduce our MC, Electric Mermaid MC Derek Hanebury, who has taught writing at North Island College here in Port Alberni for many, many years. Take it away, Derek.
You were supposed to say many, just many years.
Okay, well, many years.
Different things away. No, that's good. Thanks, Karl.
We're not that old.
Thanks, Karl. Welcome, everybody. Glad to see everyone here tonight, and nice to be able to join up on Zoom again. I'll just say a few things about Zoom, just in case there's anyone who's not really familiar with the platform. If you notice up in the top right-hand corner, there's a little view button you can hit, and you can choose whether you want to be in speaker view or gallery view. Gallery view kind of gives you everybody, and speaker view puts the speaker in a great big window. So I always take it into gallery view and get to see everybody that way a little bit more. It's kind of nice, but it's your choice. And of course, there's the chat down at the bottom. You can click on that and bring that over to the side so you can people can chat as the reading's going on. And I should say before we go any further that we're zooming to you from Char's Landing, which is located on the unceded territory of the Petcheseth and the Sishat First Nations here in Port Alberni. And we're always very grateful to them for sharing their land with us and the beauty of Vancouver Island. So we're in gorgeous downtown Port Alberni, the literary capital of Vancouver Island, we like to call ourselves. Even though we're a small community, we're got spirit, and we got lots of writers and readers. And traditionally, of course, we do this at Char's Landing in face-to-face. But since the pandemic, we've switched over to the Zoom, and it's been broadening the audience out and bringing more readers and featured readers in from across the country and beyond. So it's really, yeah, there you can see Char's Landing in her window there right now. Beautiful, funky space with a lovely wood floor, and it's an old church that she took and renovated and converted into the fantastic little social hub that it is for Port Alberni. It's our cultural navel, and we couldn't exist without it. So part of doing this is to try and get a bit of donation flowing towards Char to keep her venue going, because in this time she's been unable to offer any face-to-face gatherings. So if you're feeling generous at all, you can do e-transfer at chars.com, I believe. And she'll gratefully accept your donation to keep the things going. So anyway, I don't want to hold you up for too long. We're going to get into our readers here. We've got a couple of great featured readers with some Port Alberni connections, but they're not in Port Alberni. One, Vicki McLeod, is in Nanaimo, and David Aston is in Toronto. And they're gonna share with us some nonfiction work tonight, so that'll be interesting. So I'm just gonna start off with a couple of open mic readers and reminders. We've got about 5 minutes normally, but if you stray a little bit over tonight, we're not gonna drag you off the screen because we are a little bit low on our open mic readers. So our first reader of the evening is going to be Bill Engleson, and talked to him earlier there. He's on Denman Island. What are you going to share with us tonight, Bill?
Okay, well, I'm going to read from chapter 4 of a prequel of a work in progress called Drawn Towards the Sun. It's a prequel to my one novel, Like a Child at Home. It's about social work. This isn't as depressing as some of the other stuff I write. Okay, so One Busy Morning, it's called, the chapter. I catch sight of her wheeling into the parking lot. I scurry out of Larry's office. I had been pillaging his desk looking for a paperclip, an essential everyday public service implement, and rocket down the hall, cut through the file room, and peer out of the door that overlooks the front office. My plan is to have a ringside seat. The woman, hefty, straggly blonde hair, dressed in gray sweatpants and an older-looking duffel coat, anger oozing from her pores, red-faced, flame-featured, with an in-your ugly face and looking for bare aura, barrels into the reception area. Darlene is manning the desk where we graciously receive clients and others. Darlene looks frightened. You would think that in our line of work, she might have picked up some minor diffusing a hurricane skills. Apparently not today. Who the fuck's in charge, the woman demands. I want to see the asshole in charge. It is the kind of question that should be easy to answer, except that our supervisor, who, I should set the record straight, is not by most accounts anywhere near the asshole this tornado of a presence is suggesting, has the good fortune to be away at a meeting. No one is in charge at the moment. No one wants to be in charge, as that would mean attending to the woman's demands, whatever they turn out to be. Still, we do have a pecking order. All offices have a hierarchy. Nominally, the supervisor is the head honcho. He or she is our hire and fire guy or gal. Well, within limits. Our public service has a whole wing or two that performs the pleasurable act of hiring personnel, the less desirable undertakings of ultimate termination, and many of the in-between steps. So hiring is beyond a local supervisor, and firing is barely within their grasp. Nevertheless, if we are expected to bow down to anyone day in and day out, it is the supervisor. Fortunately, such adoration and respect are not a requisite part of the BC government office schemata. I suspect the union has had something to say about that. Overall, we rarely bow and scrape. Occasionally, but only in a private audience and with some crazy-ass Victoria policy standing in our way of getting the job done. As if anticipating several such disagreeable expectorations, the planners, the designers of our local office have positioned our unit right next door to the resource team digs. The resource team finds homes for our youth and child clients. We are the supplier. They have their own supervisor, Doreen Layton. More than anyone else, she is responsible or to blame for my elevation to this heady role of social welfare gopher. She initially supervised me, but a reshuffling took her to the resource team. From my point of view, this was a positive change. I could finally leave the nest. These days, as the supervisor next door, Doreen will often be available to all of us on the protection team for consultation. This emerging state of affairs absolutely reeks of the need for a consult. But the stars, unfortunately, are not aligned with us today. Doreen is likely at the same meeting as our supervisor. It is the meeting of all the supervisors in our region. Every office in Burnaby and New Westminster is, at this very moment, helmless. Every office, that is, but the office where the supervisors are having their meeting. In that office, there is a glut of leadership. I hesitate to suggest what might happen if a dozen supervisors try to decide who's in charge. Regardless, on what is turning out to be a frightfully lonely morning in our little outpost, we have all been abandoned by our management. Can I have a name? Darlene finally asked, attempting to inject some cool government civility and composition into the chaotic moment. You can tell that the still vibrating woman wants to harangue some more. None of your bloody business, sweetie, she cleverly, if somewhat absurdly, shrieks back at Darlene. Darlene is a sweetie. Whether this sweet disposition will survive many more of these receptionist-client confrontations is hard to say. We can only hope. Darlene has been thrown off script. If I had been sitting in her chair, which I have done a couple of times in the spirit of office camaraderie, I also would have been quaking in my booties. We deal in names. Names are quite literally our currency, our stock and trade. You don't exist for us if we don't have the pleasure of knowing your name. Even as I say this, I can think of exceptions. For example, incomplete child welfare reports do come our way regularly. Occasionally, all we have is the report of a concern without any specifics. Child slapped by mother in supermarket, or child pulled aggressively on arm by annoyed parent, or something is going on in the apartment next to me. I'm not going to tell you my name. The guy's a bruiser. Let somebody else rat him out. The calls are not always so dramatically vague. Sometimes callers do courteously, almost innocently call, leaving their name. Schools, for example, often call. We work closely with schools. I don't think that they like calling us, while it's probable they do appreciate that we are necessary and that they are singularly ill-equipped to investigate the daunting needs of an abused or neglected child. Our appearance at their door invariably disrupts routine. Schools are all about routine and lines of authority. When we arrive, often accompanied by the police, we shatter both the chain of command and the docile harmony schools cultivate. I'm still looking out from the sanctuary of the file room. I'm wondering who will rush to Darlene's rescue. I wonder if it'll be me. Our office houses at least 15 people. Half of the professional staff are financial workers. They are mostly older workers, experienced in the realities of administering the wearying but sustaining dole. They have all told me coffee room war stories about anger and poverty and anger and cheating and anger in the often sad, frantic lives of the individuals and families they have and still do service. They are all intimately experienced with yelling clients. In a pinch, one of them might jump in. As for our social worker contingent, every one of them also has the juice to douse this abrasive female firestorm. The seconds multiply, the standoff continues. A heroine arrives. I should have expected it. Ginny Taylor, our office manager, can stand it no longer. Like a mother hen or a regimental sergeant major, she swoops in and lays the siege to rest, we hope. Darlene, go make us some tea, she directs. I'll cover reception. Darlene gladly relinquishes her front-line foxhole. Jenny then assumes the vacated chair and gazes up at the rancorous intruder. You should probably have a seat, madam, she says crisply, pointing to the wall of client chairs. A couple of lost my space. A couple of chairs are occupied. I can see the clients already situated in them are not favorably disposed to this turn of events. Nevertheless, they remain motionless. The incensed woman, who seems to me to be in her mid-40s, is noticeably soaking up Jenny's wet blanket authoritative intervention. Whatever has driven her to this confrontational position must be, I surmise, quite exhausting. She is in flux. It may be that she has deduced that Jenny is a different kettle of fish from Darlene. If that is her deduction, perhaps she is planning her next best option. I should think that she knows that she has gotten as far as her bluster will take her. There is no dishonor in tactical retreat. One step forward, two steps back, a hop to one side, a classic shuffle in the bureaucratic ballroom. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. That was great. Brings back my days as a civil servant when I used to work for the Forest Service. You never knew what was going to come through the door and what was going to get thrown at you. Anyway, if anyone's interested in knowing more about Bill, he's put his website up on the chat there, www.engleson.ca. So feel free to go there and check it out. All right, we're moving on to our second open micer tonight. And that's going to be Mickey Findlay. And Mickey Findlay is coming to us from Errington. As most of you know, that she introduced herself earlier on, but she's a contributing writer for Chicken Soup for the Soul, huge selling book, right? And a columnist for Oasis magazine, a singer-songwriter, and also a poet. So looking forward to what you have to share with us tonight, Mickey.
Thank you, Derek. So I've decided, weirdly enough, to choose something about Christmas. So I can do that, right? Doesn't matter. Christmas can be all year long. This is called The Mother of All Christmas Gifts. And this is my own personal story. We've all received them at one time or other. You know, those special gifts that make us wonder what on earth the person was thinking. Ones that turn us into improv actors at best, liars at worst. One in particular stands out for me. I had received what I considered to be the mother of all special gifts. One that left me speechless. One that called into serious question the mental state of its donor. Family and friends were invited to celebrate Christmas at my mother's place. We gathered around her tinsel-covered artificial tree, awaiting the gift opening with anticipation. I say anticipation, but I really mean trepidation. Because when it came to my mother, One never knew what to expect. Sometimes she would regift our gifts back to us. Did she think we wouldn't notice? Other times, her gifts made no sense, like the book she gave me called Beekeeping in Nova Scotia. Now, I have neither lived in Nova Scotia nor expressed an interest at all in beekeeping. At any rate, what I was about to receive had officially brought her gift giving to a whole new level of eccentricity. Everyone watched expectantly as I began to tear the wrapping paper off my present. I was nervous about what I would uncover. One could almost hear jaws drop as we all stared wide-eyed at the spectacle laid before us. I was suddenly reminded of a line from an infamous Christmas poem, but with a slight modification. When what to my wondering eye should appear, 30 boxes of tampons marked "To Daughter Dear." Yes, tampons, 30 boxes, in all shapes and sizes. 30 blue boxes of shame staring up at me. What was I to do? What was I to say? I was at a loss for words. My brother-in-law fidgeted in his seat as his face turned the same color as his flaming red hair. My husband looked at me, looked at my mother, then back at me. A friend looked down at her nails and then out the window. You could hear a pin drop. Was this a joke? Should we laugh? My mother wasn't laughing. If anything, she looked pleased, as if she had given me the most wondrous gift ever. Now, I have been raised to always be grateful and show appreciation for whatever I was given. So, as the dutiful daughter, I thanked her while trying to keep the bewilderment from showing on my face. As I choked back a nervous giggle, I asked her how she had accumulated so many boxes of, well, you know. Her reply was almost as unsettling as the gift itself. Well, some of them I saved for you after my menopause kicked in, and some were delivered for free in my mailbox. So I ran around to all the neighbors and told them I was putting together a care package for my daughter, who lives way up north, and would they be so kind as to donate their free packages to the cause? Once again, we were all rendered speechless. The long, awkward silence was finally broken by my son, who asked innocently, "What are those, Daddy?" "Mommy will explain later," he replied. "Oh, great. Here, open a present, quickly." Now, as it turned out, the tampons were unusable. My mom had stored them under her bathroom sink for several years, where a slow leak had made them all hard and crunchy. A leak she never knew about because my Christmas gift had soaked up all the moisture. Needless to say, they all landed up in the landfill. A shame, really, after all the work she had put into collecting them. Regardless of what you may be thinking, I can assure you the story is absolutely true. Who could make this stuff up? As they say, fact is often stranger than fiction. Truer words were never spoken. Soak them up.
Thank you, Vicki.
You're welcome.
Well, as they say, it's the thought that counts, right? So, bless your heart. All right. Karl, I'm thinking we'll maybe go to a featured reader now, if that's okay with you.
No, that's what we do. We usually do. I told Vicki that. Vicki knows what's going on.
All right. Good. So I'm going to go to Vicki first, and we'll save David for a little bit later on. We'll have a couple more open micers after Vicki here. And just so you know, the featured reader is going to have about 15 minutes to read, and then we'll have a little bit of Q&A time. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask them. But let me tell you a little bit about Vicki McLeod first. So she's coming to us from Nanaimo tonight, and she is the author of 4 books, and she's also a TED Talk speaker and a coach. presenter, consultant, an award-winning writer and entrepreneur. And for more than 2 decades, through her consultancy, Main Street Communications Limited, she's helped organizations, governments, and small businesses create conversations that matter with clients, customers, and stakeholders. She's coached and mentored leaders, executive teams, and individuals to take inspiration and turn it into strategy. That's what we all need to do, right? Take inspiration and turn it into strategy. Beautiful. She's a graduate of the Writers Studio at Simon Fraser University, works in nonfiction, fiction, and poetry, and her books include You and the Internet of Things, Digital Legacy Plan, and Untrending, a field guide to social media that matters. Great titles. So Vicki, welcome to the Electric Mermaid, and take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'd just like to start by acknowledging that I'm reading and writing from the unceded lands of the Nanaimo, the Coast Salish people here in Nanaimo. I'd also like to thank very much Charlene for this opportunity and your crew, our MC, Derek Hanebury, and Jacqueline, Carmichael, and Karl Kjorven, and also my thanks to Creative BC and the Canada Council for the Arts. And I'm delighted to be sharing the stage tonight, the virtual stage, with David Aston and our open mic readers. Thank you. And I have a bit of a tough act to follow, I think. I'm not going to talk to you about tampons, I can assure you. But I'm going to say this, 2 of my books were launched during the pandemic, and COVID has really posed a challenge for writers and readers and publishers. So we're very, very grateful to those who support writing and reading, as Char's Landing and the Electric Mermaid Live Reads is doing. So just my thanks on behalf of the industry. And I think it's really appropriate that we're joining together in the digital environment tonight, as it aligns very neatly with the main theme that runs through most of my books and much of my other writing. There's a question that I've been trying to answer, and the question is this: how can we be fully human in a technical world? And I've spent several years working with this question, and I'm going to frame my remarks tonight through the lens of my writing and my research, and also through the lens of my work as a communication specialist, as Derek mentioned in the opening. Now, some of you here may be really comfortable with technology and the way we use it in our daily lives, and some of you may be rolling your eyes thinking, oh, you know, she's not going to talk to us about social media and the internet. I hate that. It's a waste of time. And that's fair. I certainly started out as a reluctant advocate for social media. So let me share a little bit about my own journey and into social media, the world of digital marketing, and then how this became a catalyst for my nonfiction work on these subjects. So my basic story starts when I was 50, and I was driving down the freeway to Abbotsford to visit a client. And I suddenly realized at that moment that if I didn't get into social media, I would have to get out of business. And this was not a welcome epiphany for me in any way. I had been in business for decades. I was really at the top of my game. I'd sort of achieved a level of mastery in my work. And I frankly didn't want a learning curve. But I knew that if I was going to continue to serve my clients, I needed to explore this sort of brave new world. And so I chose to engage myself in the social media learning curve. So that was 13 years ago. And as I navigated the World Wide Web of the time and social media, which was very new then, it became clear to me that despite the abundance of information available about how to use social media and the internet for either business or personal use, there was a conversation that was missing. And the conversation was about, how do we remain human in a technical world? How do we use social media mindfully? How can we use digital marketing ethically? And I was teaching my clients to use the technology, but I wasn't teaching them how to manage the overwhelm that it brought with it, and certainly the disruption that it was causing to their businesses and to their lives. So how can our lives not be consumed by the technology that's here to serve us? And this dilemma, I'm sure, is familiar to at least some of you. So I decided in 2016 to write a tiny book that offered my perspective. So this is the tiny book here called Untrending. So I'm going to open my reading by reading you an excerpt from chapter 12 of this book. My belief is that we are all connected. We come from the same celestial soup as the stars, as does all life on the planet. In our cells, I think we know this. I believe our deepest longing is to remember our oneness. This is why we are compelled to gather in tribes, online and off, to gather and unite our hearts in purpose, whether work, play, worship, or survival. We hunger for connection, and so we are driven to communicate. Yet what we are doing more often than not on social media is broadcasting. Michael Harris, in his book, The End of Absence, describes his compulsion to text about his first solo visit to the summit of the Eiffel Tower in this way: "I wish I had just looked out at Paris and left it at that. I gave in to sharing the experience, and I fumbled and dropped the unaccountable joy that life was offering up. Looking back, I think it seems obvious that efficient communication is not the ultimate goal of human experience." So what is the ultimate goal of human experience? The swift adaptation to telecommunications technology certainly reveals our desire to connect and communicate efficiently. But more than that, above all else, we seek to know. What is it that we want so achingly to know? We are after knowing the mind of God. We want to solve the mystery. We want to swim in the pool of universal intelligence and understand the magic forces. So how do we, from our terrestrial standpoint, access this cosmic juice? The answer lies in prayer, meditation, music, art, poetry, or whirling like dancing Sufis into ecstatic remembering. Also, Facebook. Yes, Facebook. I think the brilliance of social media is that it makes tangible via technology a concept we all know by heart. We are connected. The internet, the World Wide Web, simply makes manifest the reality of the interconnectedness of the web of life, at least at a human scale. But what's missing? Spirit and nature. Through our social media accounts, we have our fingertips on the world, but technology itself is cold, and we are warm. So what I want you to consider as we gather in digital community right here is how can we express our warmth and humanness in the cold environment of technology? First and foremost, the key principle is that the internet is a place, not a thing. We access it via machinery, our device and our laptops, our phones, but once we're there, we are together with other humans. The place is virtual, but the people and the relationships are real. What we say, how we say it, matters. So I opened Untrending with these questions. What if every post you made was a forever post? A note from the now you to the future you. A message from present time cartwheeling out to the future and captured as your legacy, your leave behind. What if every post is a missive that will last a lifetime or possibly several lifetimes? Words, impressions, photos, heart wings in 140 characters that don't just brush by your fans and followers, but leave tiny ink marks, feather-shaped, cast in virtual stone. If we start to think of our online engagements as having long-term impact, carrying a message that outlives us, that possibly outlives our children, then we start to think more seriously about how we engage online. We start to think about legacy and about the contributions we are or aren't making to important human discourses. It's easy to dismiss the internet and social media as simply a place filled with cat videos, celebrity gossip, and pictures of breakfast. But that would be unfair and would be not doing justice to this amazing technology and the promise it offers, giving us the ability to reach out across time and space, to connect with, learn about, support, encourage, and engage with one another worldwide. And during these COVID days, the internet has become a lifeline to our livelihoods and to our families. So as a result of writing this tiny book, I was able to spread my message at conferences and present at seminars in the digital and social space, opening up this conversation about how we connect online and what it means to think in terms of legacy. And these conversations led to the opportunity to write my second book with my co-author, Angela Crocker, and I'm just delighted to welcome Angela here tonight. And even more delighted to say that today is the 2-year anniversary of the publication of the book, Digital Legacy Plan. It's a guide to the personal and practical elements of your digital life before death that came out in March of 2019 with Self Counsel Press. So lovely to celebrate this here with you. But it's turned out to be a very popular and a very timely book, given the extensive digital footprint that most of us are creating. So if you just think about your own footprint, and you might not think you have a very large one, but I would suggest you Google yourself, and you will probably be quite surprised at what you have, how much of yourself is there. And we also found in our research that the average user has about 200 online accounts. So this is not your high-end user, just your average user. So it's something to think about. But the blurb for this book states this: 100 years from now, there will be 1 billion dead people on Facebook. That's staggering. As a society, we need to figure out how we're going to come to grips with that. Not only are we living much of our lives online, but we're dying there too. So the book deals with primarily with the practical and personal aspects of your digital estate. Who will take care of it? How will it be managed after your death? Do you want to live on or not digitally? But something interesting that we discovered as we were researching the book were the emerging trends around death and dying in the digital age. So I'm going to give you an excerpt from the book now that follows a chapter where we had been discussing memorial websites, Facebook remembering pages, and things like the use of online groups as a channel for collective grief. This is from chapter 8 in called Death and Dying in the Digital Age. Dealing with death in the 21st century presents its own set of challenges. In addition to, or possibly because of, extensive access to the internet, trends and practices in funeral and memorial services are changing. The grieving process, once a very private affair, especially for those of us born in the 20th century, is becoming more public, returning us to a kind of collective community mourning enabled by the internet and reminiscent of pre-industrial culture. So what we discovered in our research, what we supported in our book, is that the internet and social media are contributing to the reemergence of a kind of community around grieving that harkens back to the tight-knit kinship of pre-industrial times when a whole community would come out. If someone died in a community, the church bell would toll, and whether you knew that person or not, you would go to mourn with that family. So we're finding that this is happening now on social media. The global reach of accessible real-time communication has made it substantially easier to foster human-to-human connection. This is a kind of kinship that many of us long for. But we need to do this carefully. We need to do it thoughtfully, and we need to do it with respect for our very human limitations. So one of the key issues we need to consider here is that technology advances far faster than our human ability to process and use the technology. And this is at the crux of the difficulty of being human in a technical world. We're connected, but are we connected? So in 2017, I wrote an article in my newspaper column about the impacts of the disorganized and chaotic way that information flows into our news feeds. And I said, scrolling through the Facebook newsfeed can be an emotional roller coaster ride. Life and death, tragedy and comedy all flow across our screens at a scale and scope that isn't really possible to consciously absorb, let alone respond to adequately. Crammed news feeds leave us bouncing from joy to sorrow without regard for the pace of our senses. We're left reeling, stranded in an algorithmically induced emotional storm. Social media itself is highly personal, but its pace and scope is impersonal. So, if we combine the effect of the daily newsfeed roller coaster with the ever-increasing number of Facebook and other social media users who will die as time goes by, we're faced with a true 21st century dilemma. Is clicking an emoji an adequate way to respond empathetically to the news that someone is grieving or to react to personal loss? Expressing more nuanced emotional reactions is challenging. Compassion, empathy, tenderness, relief, anticipation. These are subtle and sometimes complex sentiments. And in times of shock, or if death is sudden, or even in the freshness of grief, finding a way to express ourselves or how to respond properly is enormously challenging. As it is, we often find ourselves tongue-tied at important moments. We fail to speak the words we want to say to our loved ones, even under more traditional circumstances. We are prone to hide what we really feel. Skillfully learning to articulate emotional range is a life's work. And it's important to realize that we're being called upon to exercise these skills in the asynchronous world of the internet. In my most recent book, which I have here, Effective Communication at Work, this was published in 2020 by Rockridge Press, I take a look at the challenges we find in communicating at the intersection of the digital and analog worlds. In chapter 7 of this book, I say, at heart, good communication is about establishing connection. Foundational to establishing good connection are trust-building characteristics like integrity, mutual respect, curiosity, open-mindedness, humility, and a willingness to be vulnerable with others. These characteristics apply both online and offline. So in some ways, the examples that I've given you here illustrate a way that the early promise of social media and the internet is being delivered. Social technology promised us that we could reach across time and space and connect with others. It offered us an unparalleled opportunity to experience our collective connection. But I said in the closing of my book, You and the Internet of Things, which was published by Self Counsel Press in April of 2020, the following. I've got it up here. I'll read it from here. Much of the early promise of the internet and microtechnology turned out to be illusory. Technology has not provided us with a worry-free life of ease. There are indeed very real issues of privacy, security, and the use of our data to manipulate and control us. We must also consider the distancing effect that digital communication can have on our relationships. We all have a role to play in shaping the design and use of technology and plotting the course of the future. It requires us to be actively involved. So I'd like to close now with a quote from Arthur C. Clarke and a final paragraph from Untrending. Just a second here, bookmarked. Arthur C. Clarke said, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." And I said, how do we communicate the blood and bone of our perfectly imperfect humanness via integrated circuits and microchips? In part, this is the challenge I'm posing. We can give only what we have to give, our words, our intentions, our deeds and actions. Only humans can give the internet legs. The truth is, we are connected now. We are connected when we get in the car and drive to help a stranger harvest berries or pause to ponder nature. We are connected when we reach out to hold a hand, to rock a fussy child, to moon gaze, or to host a picnic. When we make our posts a form of art and reverie, peel back our imitative layers and are nakedly ourselves, with vulnerable truth as our currency, we get closer to the godlike magic we seek. There is no doubt that being human in a technical world is challenging. I believe we're up for the challenge. Thank you, and I will see you on the interwebs.
Wonderful, Vicki. Thank you so much. That's very thought-provoking stuff and something I wrestle with daily, and I'm sure many of the others online here with us do as well. You know, I watched that movie, The Social Dilemma, on Netflix.
Right.
And was quite frightened by the power of the algorithms. And I've seen, you know, firsthand, I remember on Twitter, it asked me what kind of Twitter messages would I like to see, just ones that I agree with or ones that I, you know, from the other end of the political spectrum. And I asked for the other. Well, I get maybe one from the other. And, you know, after 50 of things that reinforce my beliefs. So sometimes I worry that it's driving us into these really narrow cones, these echo chambers. Any thoughts on that? And then I'm going to throw it to everybody else.
I'm going to just say that, you know, first of all, I mean, I think it's so important what you're pointing to is this level of self-awareness that we need to have about the environment that we're in. Right? So I almost think in the same way that you might have told, you know, your children as they were growing up, like, don't go into a dark alley at night alone. You know, so you want to be aware, what is the environment that we're in? What are the pitfalls of this environment? What do we need to be aware of and what do we need to be careful of? And I think the use of our data is something that's really important, which I do talk a bit more about in You and the Internet of Things, just how and why the data is collected. I mean, there's some really good reasons, for sure. Technology is being used in all kinds of amazing and empowering ways on the planet. So we don't want to lose that. We don't want baby out with the bathwater, but we want to be aware that there's a way that we're siloizing and there's a way that the data itself is being algorithmically directed. What we're seeing, we're not seeing on our feeds, is being driven by an algorithm that we have, you know, there's some ways we can deal with that. But again, you know, I often say to people, it's easy to be intimidated by technology, especially if you are not a digital native, you're not someone that was sort of born to it. And that puts you, you know, if you're kind of after, you know, my age or, you know, a little older, that kind of puts you in that. But it is the world we're in. And to actually engage in the learning curve and to use your pocketbook, to use your vote, to use your behavior as a way of helping to shape the technology, because it's not going to go away. technology is not going to disappear, but we can actually take an active role in how it is used. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm happy to take questions or ask me
throw it
anything,
out
as I like to say, AMA.
Otherwise, I've got more to ask her, but go ahead if there's anything else out there.
Are you going to moderate the questions, Derek, or do I need to pay attention? I only see part of the screen here.
Okay. Well, they can just unmute. If they want to ask a question, they can just unmute and jump on board there. Yeah, or wave at me.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Rory, go ahead, Rory.
Hi. I'm just saying hello. I have an undergraduate in communications, in applied
Wonderful.
communications, and I guess I'm putting it the other way around. Do you have a question for us, us practitioners? Because I work in a field where First Nations people recognize and utilize the social media on a high level, and they have their knowledge keepers talk of Ishik Ishawak, which means we are one, but we're all interconnected, and that goes back 500 years. You know, so I find it very fascinating. And is it old or is it new? We're just really talking about a different mode. And
no, yeah, I think the argument that I'm making is very consistent with what you're saying. If I am taking your remarks in alignment with what you're trying to put across, is that we are connected and we know we're connected. And I think for me, the big epiphany that I had, particularly around Facebook, because it was the first social networking platform that I got familiar with. I was on Twitter, I think a little before Facebook, was that it made manifest to me in a very tangible way, something we've always known, which is that we are all connected. And technology has enabled us to actually see that in a very, so if you doubted it, you can now see very tangibly through the World Wide Web, through the way that the web operates, how that interconnection works. And what I would love and what I'm advocating for is that we take that awareness and we apply that. We don't separate technology from the world. We say, if we are indeed all connected, which we all know, we know it in ourselves. We know it in our blood and bone. And I think our First Nations people have led the, have historically been intuitively connected to that. We're learning that in the industrialized world, I think more so. But let's take that and then apply it in all the aspects of our life. And let's use the web in the ways that enhances, expands that connection and expands the responsibility that we have because we're connected. And I know there's a big argument in the world right now about sort of like my personal rights versus my collective responsibility. And I always like to say, there's no question which one's more important. There's absolutely, because we're connected. Your individual choice affects the whole community. So guess what? It's not even a debate in my mind, but that's.
Well, thank you for sharing it like that. But here we are in the last 50 years, but could you imagine 100 years from now?
I like to. In my early days in this work, I used to say, I would just love to be alive in another 100 years and see where it all goes. And now I'm feeling a little differently. Now I'm feeling a little like, this is good. The rest of I think it's time for the next year. I'm hopeful though, I have to say, maybe that's just my nature. But I believe that we know how to use technology wisely and well. We just need to be reminded. And we need to overcome our resistance. I think we need to overcome, I'm not saying we need to be assimilated into the Borg, but we need to overcome our resistance. We need to understand that technology is a tool for our use and that we are the ones that are at choice with the tool. Yeah. So we get to choose as humans how we want this technology to be used, and we get to influence that. And if we just step back from it, then we're not exercising our ability to influence positively.
Okay, I'll allow others to talk to. Okay.
Thank you. If they wish.
Anyone else there with a question? I'll pose another one if no one else has one, and that's interested to see where you come down on this, Vicki. I really get what you're saying about the need to be savvy about it and to use it properly. And I really feel that if we are not savvy, it uses us instead of us using it, sort of, because of the way it's engineered right now. Do you think there's any merit in trying to impose more regulations on social media, for example, around the use of their algorithms that do tend to drive us into opposing camps and
Mhm.
separate us more than divide
Yeah,
us.
my short answer to that is yes, and I guess it's probably not going to be a surprise to this group. But I mean, I do feel like we have a shared responsibility, and that includes government. And I think that, I mean, I love the wild early days of the internet, the way it was then. And I'm looking at a couple of people here. Angela, I know, will remember this, and Sharon will know, when the internet really was this open space that people came into very collaboratively and really wanting to understand this space and to learn and grow with it. And it has become something else. And I do feel that there's a very big role for governments and regulators in terms of how this space is used and what's permissible in this space. And like all cultural nodes or societies, we evolve. And again, I can only emphasize that we as consumers have a big part to play. We, as the users of technology, have a role to play. And I'd love if, I don't want to put my friends on the spot, but if Sharon or Angela would like to chime in to add to that, because I know that they have a lot of expertise and depth as well. With no, absolutely, just I'll get the text message later. Don't you ever do that to me again.
I'll turn on my microphone. I'm not.
Thanks, Angela.
Were you leading me somewhere in particular, Vicki? Is my first thought.
No, I wasn't leading. Just in terms of, I know we talked about it in Digital Legacy Plan, that one of the things that's happening is that the technology is moving faster than the legislature. The legislation is moving. So,
Absolutely.
For example, we don't have the same kind of rules that govern your digital assets as we have that govern your assets that you might have in your last will and testament, for example. So that's just one example. But the role of regulators in the internet, like I know all my friends say to me, Vicki, don't break the internet. Don't make them give us so many rules and regulations that they're going to break the internet. But I'm like, I don't want to break it, but I think the internet's a utility and the government needs to govern it like a utility. So.
And I think we're in an impossible time. When you look back, you go back to, say, radio. It took 38 years for 50 million people to adapt to having a radio in their family home. But then you flash forward to a few years ago, YouTube, Facebook, it took 2 or 3 years to reach 50 million people. So for the regulations to catch up, and unfortunately, a lot of the regulations are applying in bits and pieces. And I think that's part of where we have a problem with the regulation is it's needed, but some existing laws apply in part.
And
so
figuring depends on where too, right? The laws vary that govern these kinds of things from country to country, state to state, province to province. So
yes,
there's this whole issue also of consistent application in what is a global utility in a sense. Sharon, did you have something to add? I see that they popped you onto the screen just in case.
Yeah, it's a toothy subject. It's pretty interesting. So I think one thing I would say is to support what you're talking about, Vicki, the way we regulate and monitor, period, with government has to change. And what I've been thinking about as you've been talking is, Facebook was just allowed to call itself, just a platform, software platform, agnostic of anything that was on it, because there wasn't a category in industry regulatory categories for what something was like that was a software platform that had completely unmonitored, for all intents and purposes, completely unmonitored content. That would be like telling a newspaper or a television station you can just publish anything you want because you're just technology, right? And when we look and do research, as I'm sure you've both done, different industry categories and that, some of them you look at it and you're like, was this written in 1960? Because, I can't even find an industry category that fits what you're doing. I'm sure any of you who have signed up for, some sort of a thing like LinkedIn or whatever, and they ask you what industry you're in. And it feels almost like they're saying, I don't know, that I'm a barmaid in a 1980, in an 1850s, a hotel or something. And like the categories are so old fashioned and bizarre that I just think of most of my friends and what they do for a living, it can't be done. So I think just, modernizing and making more nimble how we regulate and the speed and creativity with which we can just define what things are and do it more proactively instead of waiting. I think that's very interesting. And the first social platform that I really got involved in was Flickr. And I'm an amateur photographer. And you know, if anybody else was on it back in the day, just after it first started, I mean, it's everything you're describing, Vicki. It had, you know, culture, values, collaboration. Groups of people could self-form and do contests to create things together, and they'd even publish their work. And it was much less about the photography looking great, the way you find today on Instagram, than telling a story, or, you know, like following a theme that day. We're going to take pictures of white flowers, and everybody would go out and take pictures of white flowers, and it didn't matter if they were perfect. And then we just connected around that. There was a lot of conversation. But of course it missed mobile, right? And that's why Instagram became popular, even though it pales in comparison. So I think there are probably pockets out there that, you know, people have formed sort of groups to the side, maybe, where they do the types of things, you know, you suggest would, you know, is great when there's social media. So despite everything, I love social media, and it's changed my world. It's helped me keep in touch with friends around the world. It's helped me.
I think that's the other thing that's so interesting, is that we have this opportunity. And I actually have another version of this talk that is really about community and how we can use social media and digital tools to actually grow authentic community, not just a group of people that are following us to buy our stuff. Which is a transactional kind of thing. So I think there might be a couple other people who want to ask questions, or I see the boxes are popping up. So thanks so much.
I have a thought or two, if I could.
Well, if I could
I live in a small community where I find social media to be an almost sinister thing. We recently had a community Facebook page that shut down after a rather tumultuous discussion about a historical domestic fallout that drew in some other people, and it had some similarities to the Victoria restaurant situation with staff being abused, and it became there's a whole site for that. And so we had this conversation in a small community. We have 1,000 people on our island, maybe twice that number on the particular Facebook page, and it drove the administrators of the Facebook site to basically shut down, and it took them about a week to come back with a modified version of what they were. And it was a totally inappropriate, unexplainable, useless process that did not serve the community at all. And in terms of having this discussion, an important discussion, but I think social media has a lot of things to learn before it becomes usable, particularly in more confined areas.
Yeah, and you have a small community, so you actually have an opportunity in that community to be able to design something that works for you in terms of Facebook use or social media use. But again, I would always just like to remind people that it's people that are using the platform. It's not the platform.
I just want to interject here. I'm sorry, but we do have David Aston standing by from Toronto, and this is an excellent conversation. I invite you to stay afterward. I'm here till midnight. I'm here. I live here, so I invite you.
And people can feel free to email or connect with me online as well. I'm happy to continue the discussion online too. This always opens up a big discussion.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you for your patience.
No,
and thank you, David, for your patience.
Good stimulating conversation, and I probably shouldn't have let it go so long, but it was too good. Anyway, thank you so much, Vicki. And just a reminder to people, if they're interested in any of our books, they can go to vickimcleod.com and find the whole list there and order them. So much appreciated, and thanks for everybody chipping in the conversation there. It's very interesting. So we're going to have a couple more open micers, David, if you're okay to just hang in for a bit there. I know it's getting late in Toronto, but we won't delay much longer. So,
Derek, do you mind if we keep going with the second feature, because it is too late? Okay. We usually have the two features stand by. I'm sorry if I'm in. Okay. I'm changing the rules, but
no, that's
we usually
fine.
do the two features side by side. Let's just do that because it's very late for David.
Okay, sure. Yeah, no problem at all. Okay, David, go ahead. Let me just read a little bit about you. So David is a personal finance and investment journalist. He's got an MA in economics and is a chartered professional accountant. He published a new book, The Sleep Easy Retirement Guide, in January 2020, just before the pandemic, I guess. So lucky you. He's going to share immediately useful help on your taxes and building your nest egg in the pandemic era. So some very useful advice for us. So welcome from Toronto, David. It's all yours.
Thanks so much, Derek. I should actually warn you that even though I'm an accountant, I don't know anything about taxes. So that is not something I'll be providing tips on, but I've been writing about personal finance and investments and retirement since 2007. So it's kind of a second career after a corporate career. And I've written for Money Sense and other publications for many years. And the book, The Sleep Easy Retirement Guide, kind of draws on those writings that I've done over the years. And it also draws on my own preparing for retirement. And if there's an opportunity at the end, we talk about a Q&A, but I think it's also, I'd certainly appreciate people sharing their own experiences about retirement as it pertains to my talk. And that way I can maybe learn some things from some of you, as well as having the opportunity to share some of my own thoughts. So I'm going to do a reading largely drawn from my book, The Sleep Easy Retirement Guide. The first thing I'd like to say is during the next few minutes of the presentation, don't take the title of the book literally. So I'm not really intending to make you sleepy. I am going to talk about retirement lifestyles and spending based largely on chapter 5 of my book. Now, the most important thing is to find a fulfilling retirement lifestyle that fits within whatever means you have. The process of figuring out the right retirement lifestyle for you and what you need to spend to get it go hand in hand. So every retirement lifestyle comes with a price tag. The key is really being flexible and creative to make the most of whatever you can afford. The starting point for pricing a retirement lifestyle is usually that you expect to enjoy an overall standard of living that is fairly similar in level, although not identical in detail, to the standard of living you enjoyed in your working years. If you have grown accustomed to a middle-class lifestyle, chances are the standard of living that you'll be comfortable with in retirement would also be broadly described as middle class. Now, we usually continue in retirement many of the general patterns of everyday spending in terms of the kinds of food we eat, the clothes we wear, the cars we drive, and the standard of accommodation we live in. That doesn't mean you'll want to live your life exactly the same way. It's true many of the specific activities you do in retirement will be different. But overall, the standard of living to which we become accustomed is a powerful psychological norm and useful starting point for our spending expectations in retirement. Fortunately, maintaining a similar overall standard of living in retirement for most people costs a lot less than it did in your middle years. That's because many of the midlife costs that we don't actually affect our lifestyles tend to drop off or end by the time we retire. This includes the cost of raising kids, carrying a mortgage, the work-related costs like the payroll deductions, and sometimes things like commuting and buying clothes for work. And once you've retired, you're past the point of setting aside large chunks of income for savings. Then as you need and have less income, you pay less income tax. So now it's true there are often a few categories in which you'll need to spend more, like things covered by corporate benefit plans. But by and large, the amount of money you need to spend to maintain your standard of living in retirement generally goes down by a lot. As a rule of thumb, in retirement, you'll typically spend 50 to 70% of what you earned in your middle years to maintain a similar standard of living. Now, getting a handle on current spending is a good place to start in pricing out your retirement lifestyle. To do that, it helps to track your current annual spending by major categories, such as shelters, vehicles, groceries, and so on. Then review the cost for each category and assess how much you think each category will change in retirement. If your finances are tight, you might have to scrutinize all your spending more carefully. But even in that case, the process shouldn't just be an exercise in self-denial or cost-cutting. Rather, the objective should be to economize on areas of spending that don't provide particular value so that you have money to spend purposefully on whatever is important to you. The best way for you to allocate your money beyond the necessities is a very individual decision. But whatever the specifics, your spending should help keep you socially engaged with family and friends, physically fit, well-nourished, and mentally stimulated. You should also try to set a reasonable balance between spending on the basics and spending on the fun and fulfilling extras. Finding that balance is important, whether your budget is ample or tight. If you don't have much money to spend, it's tempting to think that you should cut all the non-essentials and just focus on the basics. However, as financial planner Annie Kivik points out, having some money for the fun and fulfilling extras is important for the enjoyment of life. Even if your budget is tight, Annie recommends, and I agree with her, she recommends you should try to allocate at least $5,000 annually for a single person or $10,000 for a couple for the fun extras. And if you have a larger budget, obviously spending more is even better. But to quote Annie, life is supposed to be enjoyed. It is important to have something to look forward to be able to create that special moment in life, even if it's just a small amount. We all need it. While you should spend your money wisely, regardless of whether your budget is large or constrained, having more money obviously allows you to have a longer list of fulfilling activities. If your finances are tight, you need to prioritize more carefully. Even then, the exercise shouldn't be about denying your retirement dreams. Usually, you can find an economical version of the dream that maintains its essence, but also fits within your means. For example, if you like to travel, you might combine trips, so you go less often, but possibly for longer periods, thus economizing on airfare. Or it may mean more car trips in North America and less overseas trips to exotic destinations. Or you could find a long-term rental of a modest apartment in a less pricey area and make your own meals instead of staying at a hotel in a prime location and eating out. So far, I've spoken to you about retirement spending without mentioning any actual dollar spending figures. Now, as a chartered accountant, I feel a professional obligation to talk some numbers. So I want to provide you with some retirement spending figures that you may potentially use as benchmarks. And for those of you already retired, I'd be kind of interested in your feedback on what you think would make is kind of an adequate retirement spending figure for your needs. But before that, I want to acknowledge that retirement is a lot more expensive for singles than for couples on a per person basis. That's because single retirees don't have the same ability as couples do to share costs for things like accommodation and vehicles. As a result, you can't just take what a couple spends and divide by 2. The precise cost relationship between couples and singles will vary by situation, but we can expect that singles will typically spend somewhere in the range of 60 to 80% of what couples spend. Now, I have some figures on what average senior singles and couples spend in a year, and it's based on Statistics Canada data that I've adjusted. Now, my book includes a detailed breakdown by category, but for this presentation, I'll just describe total average spending, including the amount spent on income taxes. So for senior singles, the data suggests average spending is about $43,000 a year. And for senior couples, that average spending figure is about $65,000 a year. Now, even if you can't manage average spending levels, you should still be able to enjoy a fulfilling retirement lifestyle on quite a bit less. my estimate is that a fulfilling but fairly bare bones middle-class retirement starts at about $33,000 for senior singles and $44,000 for senior couples who own their homes and are debt-free. Now, if you're a renter in a high-rent city like Vancouver or Victoria, you'll need to pay more. But this bare bones middle-class budget, you should still be able to enjoy a fulfilling retirement lifestyle that includes important middle-class trappings, the comfortable accommodation, plenty of healthy food, a car or other adequate transportation, and fulfilling activities. And the figures also includes Annie's fund budget figure of $5,000 for singles and $10,000 for couples. Now, if you're interested in seeing some specific examples of retiree lifestyles and details of what they spend to support those lifestyles, my book provides a number of actual case examples. And now I'd like to move on and talk about some particular spending tips. Tip number one, experiences are what makes retirement meaningful. And so the scientific literature has found that generally using your disposable income to pay for memorable experiences is a lot more fulfilling than just using it to buy stuff. And this is a topic I'd be interested on for people who have retired to get their feedback on this. But what I find talking to people who have retired in the last few years is that many of them are focused on doing just that. They're trying to do lots of active and interesting things that create those memorable experiences. Spending time with family and friends is huge. Travel is typically high on the list, but there's also all sorts of activities designed to stimulate the mind, be socially engaged, and stay physically fit. I'm also finding that recent retirees generally don't seem to be very materialistic in terms of status objects and luxuries, although they appreciate possessions for the utility and comfort they bring. In a number of cases, retirees have told me that their values have shifted in terms of how they spend their retirement, their money in retirement compared with their midlife years. And one example, a BC woman I talked to who is in her early 60s said she used to be a clothes horse in her terms. And she'd go out to dinner and spend an extraordinary amount of money with the best bottle of wine. And she'd take plenty of expensive beach vacations. So, and now she lives comfortably, but a lot more modestly, and just says, I have developed a different focus. Tip number two, if finances are tight, set aside money for travel in a separate pot. Many new retirees find it's important to try to do active things like travel while they're still fairly healthy and mobile. But if your finances are tight, you may not have a lot of room to fit it into your regular budget. Now, budgets are often meant to apply on an ongoing basis. That's typically kind of the way we think of it. If you ask your financial advisor how much you can afford to budget in total, they might tell you something like $50,000 a year. And I'm just picking a number as an example. But implicit in that idea is that you could spend $50,000 this year and a similar amount next year and a similar amount each year after that, continuing indefinitely. So if your budget is tight, you might have a hard time fitting in much money for travel. But if you want to spend travel for money just in the next few years, you don't necessarily have to cram it into a budget that is intended to continue every year long into the future. Instead, one way to do it is you could set aside a certain amount. It could be something like $200,000 or $300,000, or sorry, $20,000 or $300,000 or $30,000. So the smaller amount, $20,000 or $30,000 in a separate pot. So the idea is put the money aside and draw on it for as long as you need to in the first few years of retirement. So it could be a relatively small amount, will go a long way in that regard. So one senior I talked to calls it a slush fund. And the way you can book a few nice trips in the next few years and take the money from the slush fund and not your regular budget. Of course, when that $20,000 or $30,000 slush fund is used up, the money for travel is finished, but it provides a way to enjoy plenty of travel in the early years of retirement when you're still in good health and without blowing up your regular budget. Tip number 3, I just wanted to do a brief shout out for the BC Property Tax Deferral Program, which is a fabulously generous deal. So if you're a BC homeowner with tight retirement finances, you should really keep the BC Property Tax Deferral Program in mind. And as many of you know, it allows BC homeowners 55 and over to borrow from the BC government to help pay your property taxes. And it's really a fabulous deal. The annualized interest rate is currently just less than half of 1%. So that's, you know, way lower than you'll ever get from borrowing from a bank. And of course, you're born against the equity in your home. You only have to pay it back when you sell the home or pass on. And it's a fantastic deal that other provinces don't generally offer, although Alberta has a program, but it's far less generous. So keep that in mind if you're a homeowner with tight finances. So that includes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. But in addition, it would be, I'd certainly find it interesting if people had some retirement experiences of their own that they'd like to share, and maybe we can learn from what you found on retirement spending.
Great, thank you, David. All right, let's open it up here if anybody's got any questions for David or just some comments about their own experience with retirement. I know I see a lot of people on the screens that look like they're probably in that golden kingdom. Myself,
I'll throw in a comment. I was able to retire at 55 courtesy of the provincial government, thinking I was redundant, and it was very helpful. I appreciated the political push, and I almost immediately, within a year and a half, moved to a small island away from the city. I was previously living in the city, and so I saw that as a very positive change, and have enjoyed rural life, something I hadn't really experienced before, and I'm still not totally adept at. But so I mean, I think you make some good points, and I think you've got to plan out what you're going to do, and we planned out very, very well, and it all came about rather suddenly. But so I'm pretty in favor of retiring. I have no other choice in the matter at this stage, and I'll stick with that argument.
Great, thanks, Bill. Any comments on that, David, you want to share?
Yeah, well, I appreciate sharing your comments. One thing that I'm personally kind of interested, I know I have friends who are in Toronto who were originally from BC and from Vancouver actually, but they know a fair bit about different parts of BC, and they would like to retire to Victoria, to Vancouver Island, and their finances are fairly tight, so they don't want to retire to Victoria because it's too expensive, and they have the idea that they want to retire farther up island where it's somewhat less experience, but somewhat less expensive, but the quality of life is still really good. So I'd be really interested in what you think about good places to retire up island on Vancouver Island.
Well, if they want reasonable, Port Alberni is really reasonable to live.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's a rental? What's a good rental like in Port Alberni?
If you can find one. No.
That is true. I'm not retired, but I have a 2-bedroom, and I pay about $528 for a 2-bedroom, and that's anywhere up between there. Sometimes it depends what they want.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And I'm not retired. As I said, I'm not retired, but I have always had a savings account, an extra savings account for traveling, and that's how I do it. So I just I have a regular account that I spend my money in, and checking account, but I do it my own stuff, and I have a lot of travel accounts, so I can travel, especially now.
Yes.
I think it's fair to say that the larger areas are probably much more expensive. That the further you go, I mean, I think Vancouver Island almost anywhere is very, very livable. I mean,
Yes.
I grew up in Nanaimo. I had enough of Nanaimo because I grew up there, but it's a lovely community, and I have lots of friends there. So I mean, it varies where you want to go, but the smaller areas probably are much more affordable. But along the corridor, I think it's becoming incredibly prohibitive for in terms of, and housing is just finding housing availability is problematic, except for very high end. So it's
yeah.
I just wanted to support your notion about, you asked for some feedback about people saying it's people that are retired, that they're more focused on experiences.
Yes.
And I find that that's generally true. And if I could, for example, I would spend some of my discretionary income to be in Port Alberni this evening in person at Char's Landing, in which I think I could also be having a nice meal and a couple of drinks. And so I'm wondering, are you going to have a revised edition in light of COVID and talking about retirement?
Well, I'm going to update it when I get a chance. It won't be this year though. So, but yeah. So the spending figure the average spending figure for Canada that I showed, which is 43,000 a year on average for senior singles, and 65,000 a year for senior couples. What do people think about that as a decent amount of money to live on in retirement?
Rory, maybe you want to comment on that, and then you can throw in what else you wanted to say there.
Well, as you know, people have maybe different pension plans. Now, can I be heard? I'm just being sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And, you have your old age pension and all those things that fold into and augment your, maybe your company pension, I suppose. And I find that sometimes it just sort of cuts it right in half, what you're earning, and then you're absolutely forced to deal with the reality of living under a different revenue stream. However, I'm turning something around a little bit for you. On the other side, what's this social concept of you have to retire? I'm sitting with people. I work with 230 people, and I'm working with people that are in their 75. I'm finding people are saying, my quality of life and what I enjoy doing is my work. And I'm finding people are pushing now 70 in my workforce. And I'm saying, okay, there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm hearing, quality of life, but my neighbor retired at 65, did the cruise ships to Alaska a couple times, came back. Now he's asking me to clean my gutters. I'm just trying to understand the other side of this. Why retire? Why can't we go? Because we're conditioned. Hit 65 and you retire. Give me a break. So I'm just wondering, on the other side of the equation, is that part of what we can do in the mix, is shift our age in regards to retirement? And that's a question I'm putting back.
Well, from what I see, it's really changing pretty dramatically, and there's all sorts of new options. It's not one thing. There's still the traditional retirement, which is full stop. But there's all sorts of transition arrangements, working part-time, contract, and even like working in retirement. It's no longer an oxymoron. It's kind of So it's all mix and match. Whatever works for you goes. And I think there's a lot more acceptance for employers having people work on part-time basis in retirement or contract, and 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 sometimes it's done as a cost-saving measure, and sometimes it's done as a fulfilling opportunity for people who to enjoy themselves and get a little money. So there's it's the whole world of work and retirement is really, it's all sorts of things are happening, and it's really exploding.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, good question there, Rory. Send us in that direction. Everything's changing, and with people being healthy longer too, they're ready to work longer. Sorry, somebody had a comment there. I missed them. Anyway, Char, you're coming on. Is it time to move along? I can't hear you, Char.
Everyone's pouring new drinks.
Yeah, I know. I'm craving now. As soon as I get a break, I'm going to run out there and serve myself. Yeah, you're enticing me. Oh, it's wonderful. We're still good with time, but is there time for one more question? Is there anyone else? Question or comment? It's been really great discussion tonight. Congratulations to everyone.
I don't know if you noticed there, David, there's been a lot of comments in the chat about places and stuff.
Oh,
if you want to save that, you can.
Yeah.
So if you don't know how to save the chat, you go to File. It has 3 little dots, and then you can go there and say above the participant chat with. You can say it says Save Chat, and that's where you have the chat saving, so you don't have to sit there and write it all out. I know writers like to write, but this is
we could move along there.
Just go to the bottom of your screen where it says chat, Dave. The little chat bubble.
The chat. I'm just looking how to save it so I can deal with it later.
Okay, the 3 dots at the bottom is what Karl's telling you at the very bottom of the chat.
Right there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. And also, we put everything on YouTube, and we provide the full chat comment if you would like. There's a lot of good content in there. Congratulations. Nice evening.
Super. All right. Well, maybe we'll shuffle along and do a couple of open micers now then. Thank you so much, David, for that. Lots of thought-provoking stuff there. And I should have talked to you before I retired. I think I read your book, but hindsight. All right, our next open micer is David KIppling, and then Kathy's going to follow him up afterwards, I guess. So, oh, they just jumped around my screen. There they are. Okay, David, go ahead, man.
Oh, thank you. I sort of picked up the notion at the beginning that it was kind of a non-fiction evening, and we were probably told that before, but I never listen. But it occurred to me that, what I'm going to read is true. And it occurs to me that if I want to know what people are like and what life is like, I'll read a novel. And non-fiction gives me information, but it doesn't tell me what people are like. And I'm dipping into Charles Dickens again. And Betsy Trotwood, that's exactly what people are like. And in fact, what Charles Dickens' his own writing, even when it's embarrassing, you think, oh my God, you realize this is a person, this is Charles Dickens. The stuff he writes tells us what a person is like, and he doesn't even know it. So you can take this is quite true then, what you're going to hear. I'm very fuzzy on this screen. Maybe I'm just fuzzy. Okay, here we go. So it's called Whitewash. It's a piece of writing. It's non-fiction, we'll say. He said to come in the evening. Too hot for it this afternoon. Come about 6. Old clothes, mind. Gloves, hat or something. Old man Watkins had already spent 2 days cleaning out his cowshed and cattle yard with his tractor and hydraulic shovel, scooping, scraping, breaking the scab of the yard, releasing old smells and opening rats' nests, dumping all the waste in the back field. The tractor's clumsy stutter back and forth, had been reaching our house across the village. Next came the whitewashing. It was an empty weekend and Dad had called across the garden to me. Go and be useful. Help Watkins. You don't want to sit around home all day, big lump like you. My father gestured at me for the benefit of the vicar, who had come to collect a cauliflower. Old boy here should get away from all those bloody school books, right, Vicar? Pardon my language. The vicar patted the fresh cauliflower in his bicycle's basket and smiled. No offence taken, although we do gain great blessings from books, don't we? Thank you for this, it will do nicely. How much did we say? Fiddling at a waistcoat pocket. My father winked at him. Put something in the poor box for me, eh? And the vicar wobbled away down the road. When I walked into the freshly stinking farmyard, Watkins handed me a dribbling hosepipe. Good lad, wet it all down, the walls, inside and out. Not soak it, just a gentle spray. Why wet the wall if I'm going to paint it? Watkins gave me the look. You're not painting, you're whitewashing. Paint sits on top, whitewash soaks in. Don't they teach you anything at that school? I turned on an ancient brass tap and sprinkled the cowshed walls inside and out. The day's heat had stayed in the thick plaster. The smell was old. Watkins watched but didn't come in. Now come over here and mix the lime, he called from the end of the yard, where a big paper sack had been slit open. I looked down into it, jerked my head and blinked furiously. Ow! The reek stung my nostrils and bit at my eyes. Watkins tossed me an aluminum scoop. Under his growled instructions, I sprinkled 4 scoops of lumpy lime powder into the big bucket, while Watkins took the hose and squirted water. Now stir, stir, don't stop. Watch your eyes and hands, it burns. Quick lime it is. Go on, stir, go on, get stirring. The grey slop wobbled and bubbled as I stirred with a broom handle, and Watkins threw in a handful of road salt. Break those lumps, he grinned. Go on, poke it good and hard, it ain't got no friends. A grey watery slop was the best I could produce. Okay, that's your whitewash. Now go and brush it on. Inside walls first, then the outside when it's cooled down a bit. He passed me a wide wooden brush with crude bristles. The lumpy mess in my bucket looked poor stuff. Yet, I said, looks like sick or something. What I didn't say was it reminded me of the sheep's brains my dad liked to eat. On toast, grey brains. Him and Grandad too, they liked all that village stuff. I breathed through my mouth and started inside the cowshed, sweeping big wet strokes across the old uneven plaster, even where a jagged patch had fallen out, revealing older mud streaked with horsehair and thin wooden laths beneath. The thin wash looked weak, but Watkins, who had followed me as far as the doors, called, "Not too thick, don't overdo it, just the one coat today. It always looks bad to start with." By the time I'd done the cowshed's inside walls, the sun was off the outside, and out there in fresher air, I worked faster. Okay, good lad, that's enough. Back tomorrow, same time. Needs a day to set in. It don't look much good now, but you'll see. Old man Watkins, a widow, now lived alone. Earlier in the year, his son had died, a farm accident. Right away, Watkins had sold off his bullocks before they reached their best weight. But livestock can be too much for an old person on their own, I suppose, though Watkins had loved his cattle. Mother spoke to the dishes in the sink that evening. People often do a clear up, sweeping out when someone dies or they find themselves alone. It's normal. You want to get away from the past, don't you? Only natural. The next evening, I walked down there and gazed in surprise at the bright white building under its mossy roof tiles, the walls shining in the setting sun. Watkins was watching me, looking at the cowshed, and he managed a toothy grin. Didn't know that, did you, how whitewash works? Grey slop when you put it on, but give it a day drying and it turns whiter and whiter. The lime, it bites, it changes. Whitewash, right? That's why they call it whitewash. Students, you know nothing. Now grab all the kit and mix it yourself this time. Very light spray of water again, then brush on another coat. It likes stone. Whitewash does, eats right in, kills germs too, I don't know why. This time I worked faster, first spraying water, then flinging the pale liquid across the walls, watching it soak in and go grey a second time. By the time I'd finished inside and out, Watkins had returned with a 10-gallon can that smelled like asphalt when he opened and poked at it. See this? Pitch 'em in. Tomorrow you can paint this round the bottom, outside and in. Good 2-foot strip all along the bottom of the walls. Bloody ground here is always damp. Don't want mold climbing the wall. Now this you will put on thick. Don't be stingy, slap it on. Different brush, mind you. Pitch, see, that's why they say pitch black. That night, I asked my parents why Watkins would spend time and money doing up an old cowshed he wasn't going to use again. My father shrugged. Must be 200 years old, that. Ought to be preserved. See the horsehair mixed in the plaster? Not that Watkins gives a damn for heritage. Maybe he's hoping some townie will come and pay good money to live in it. My mother did something with the cutlery and spoke quietly to the countertop. His son that died, it wasn't no accident, took his dad's shotgun. Dreadful. The coroner said accident, but it wasn't. Everyone knew. Nothing said, of course. Dad muttered, "Hush, mother," as he lit his pipe. He waved the match out, then looked sideways at me. Farm life, you never know what goes on. Next day, with the old walls shining even whiter than before, I slathered on the pitch with a proper paintbrush, a glutinous strip, thick and straight and midnight black, around the bottom of the cowshed's walls, inside and out. A stark contrast to the white above and the dusty nettles encroaching at its base. The vicar rode by on his bike, coming to an unsteady halt when he saw my work and nodded. How healthy the old place looks now, there in the sun. Perhaps you remember from Sunday school. Matthew tells us, doesn't he? Such beautiful language in the King James. Matthew chapter 10, that when an unclean spirit returns to the house it abandoned, it finds the house swept and garnished. Swept and garnished, what a wonderful phrase. Fresh and free of sin. Good job, young man. Give my regards to Mr. Watkins. The end. Did they hear it?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
But now I can't hear anybody.
Thank you there, David. That was awesome. And Kathy's going to take over now. But I have to comment on that line. Ripped off the scab of the yard. That was gold. Beautiful. All right, take it away, Kathy. Thank you.
Okay. After the long rain, Anne was squatting down in the wet driveway to watch the worm squirm its way up into the warm sun. Anne stared at the worm and then at her own gigantic feet. Anne's mother always said how tall Anne was, taller even than her, and would even point to the photographs of them to prove it. But Anne saw how in the photographs her mother always bent her knees. But my feet, Anne thought, are already as big as my mother's, maybe even bigger, and I'm still just a kid. "What you doing?" Anne's friend Mars asked as she walked up the driveway. "Nuttin'." Anne laughed to herself because whenever her father heard her say nuttin', he said, "That's what the squirrels do all day, nuttin'." "Waiting for my little brother. We're going to make a lemonade stand up the street with the kids who live there. You can come if you want." Mars carried the pitcher of lemonade and Anne brought paper cups and her writing tablet. The kids set up a board over cement blocks and used the covers from some old magazines as a tablecloth. Anne tore a page from her tablet to make a sign. It was already getting hot out, so Anne wrote CLOD, lemonade, 5 cents. Ben, one of the kids who lived there, laughed. "You think some clod's going to want to buy lemonade from us?" Anne couldn't figure out what Ben was talking about. Mars looked at Anne. "I think you spelled it wrong." Anne looked at her sign. "I did not. My sign's right. You think I'm stupid?" Mars didn't know what to do, but then she quickly looked over the magazine covers and grabbed one. On it was a photo of some ladies who were dressed in suits and hats and gloves like for church, holding a sign that said "Ban the Bomb." And underneath the photo were the words "Cold War March." Mars took Anne's finger and held it under each letter on the magazine cover, COLD, and then held Anne's finger under each letter of the word on Anne's sign. Anne felt her feet sink into the ground and her hands go into fists. She wanted to hit Mars and then hit Ben. Anne hated making a mistake, and the worst was having someone tell her about it. But she remembered how much Mars didn't like fighting. Anne didn't know what to do. "I am so hopping mad," Anne thought. So she started hopping and then swinging her arms to keep her balance. Mars, Ben, and the other kids just stared. But then they started hopping too, until they were all laughing so hard they fell on the ground. Anne quietly changed the sign, and Mars just as quietly said, "You know, Anne, if you hadn't made that mistake, I wouldn't have gotten this great idea." "What idea?" "We could make our own signs for school, just like in the magazine, except ours will say, 'Ban the bomb drills.'" "That sounds great, but I don't know what ban means." "It means stop. Stop having all the bomb drills where we have to get under our desks and put Kleenex over our noses and hear that horrible siren. Everybody hates it." "What I hate is this lemonade," Ben yelled as he spit it out on the ground. "Did you forget the sugar?" "My mother says I'm not allowed to take the sugar. My mother says sugar's expensive." Actually, Anne's mother had said, "Do you want to put us all in the poorhouse?" But Anne figured Ben didn't need to know that. "Besides, sugar attracts ants, my mother says." "Well, nobody's going to buy this." "I've got some cardboard. Let's go to the sand hills. It may be our last chance. My dad says the company's going to put up a big fence to keep us out." They all left for the big piles of sand where the construction company was building more houses. The kids climbed to the tops of the giant sand hills and slid down on their pieces of cardboard. The sand was soft and warm in the sun, and as long as they remembered to keep their mouths and eyes shut as they slid down, it was really fun. Anne could shake out her shoes later, but she hated getting sand between her teeth, and getting sand in her eyes was horrible. Anne kept her eye out for her little brother, but it was Mars who asked, "Where's Ben?" Anne just saw a bit of him poking up in the sand and ran over to dig him out. "You gotta be careful, Ben. Stay in the middle. If you get near the edge of the pile, the sand will come down on you and bury you." "You kids, get out of here. It's dangerous. You're all gonna get yourself killed," a big man from the construction company shouted at them. They all grabbed their cardboard and ran. As they ran, Anne thought, Ben might know his letters, but he sure doesn't know about important stuff like sand. The end.
Awesome, Kathy. Thank you so much. You have that magical way of invoking childhood. It's incredible. And maybe it's because we're probably of the same, roughly the same age, and it just takes me right back there. You know, we just found things to do. You just went from one activity to another to another. There was never a bored moment when we were kids. Yeah,
I'm glad we survived.
Yes, a miracle that we did. Yeah. Okay. All right. Our next reader is Kathy Vance. Kathy.
That was me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good Lord, yes. You can tell I'm a senior. Make that Joel Lunchbucket. Okay. Bob, you want to take it away there? You're going to need to unmute yourself. And I think you were going to share, Char was going to share the screen, I think, to show your, is that right? There we go.
Can you see that, Derek? You can see the how it all began?
Yes, how it all began, evolution.
Okay, and we need Joe Lunchbucket to unmute. There's a lot going on here.
There we go. All right.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Okay.
You bet. Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, that's already on the screen, so if anybody wants to read that, it's there for them. I'll just give you a couple of other ones there that are much shorter and easier to read.
You're not going to read it out for us, Bob?
I'll leave that one there for anybody that wants to read it. They can read it on their own. And I'll read a couple of easier ones. Okay, so you won't fall asleep on that one.
Sounds good.
Okay. This is a bit of a rant. Must we be our brother's keepers if they just want to go from one high to the next? Is it cheaper to supply the drugs and save on Medicare and criminal prosecution costs? Do we house and feed our addicts in shoot-up centers or send them to rehab? Do we give them 3 strikes and they're out of rehab and sentenced to leper colony where they could be fishing and farming? If any shake the monkey off their back, they can catch the next supply ship back to civilization, but preferably not home, lest they pick up their habit again. We're not all born genetically equal, and many suffer depression. Do the workers owe the shirkers a living? Or is this 21st century slavery? Tenting homeless in parks can burn our old growth forests. Could workhouses eliminate women's shelters and shoot-up centers, limit abuse and cut tax? Should we adopt Stalin's Siberian work camp motto, you work, you eat? Or should we, or should everyone be criticized, be entitled to annual, geez, I can't even read my own writing, to annual minimum wage, and we'll just help the we'll just tax the go-getters to bear the burden. BC Coast is getting an influx of retirees and homeless escaping Canada's cold, raising Medicare, welfare, and judicial costs. Do we lobby federal government for equalization payments? And if they don't comply, do we close our borders? Okay, that's it for the rant. I got a short one here. You still hear me? Okay.
Go ahead, Bob.
Do they walk among us and are a throwback from primeval past? Is it nature or nurture that molds a distinct genetic killer caste? Are they bereft of empathy and get high on thrill of the kill? Do they join military and police so blood they can legally spill? Did Hitler find ready executioners and Holocaust order fulfill? Criminals do crime and good people do what by society is desired. But to coerce innocent youth to vile acts is religion required. If murderers realize no monetary gain, do we judge them insane and execute or examine brain and with prescription drugs restrain? Can society's mental institutions deter, educate, or rehabilitate? Do we lack faith and soul? Can love thy neighbor we legislate? Switzerland has few shootings and there's a gun in every home. Is it addiction, NRA, or do we suffer from Wild West syndrome? Has capitalism's continued growth driven many species extinct? Is greed and survival trait, and from other primates we're distinct? Does chaos rule the universe, or is church-state intelligent design? Does jealous God terminate even her chosen if they cross the line? If the world turned atheist, would the sheep get a lot smarter? Without paradise reward, could they find a suicide bomber martyr? Okay, that's it for my rant.
Thanks for ranting, Bob. Okay. All right, our next reader is Bruce Hornidge here in Port Alberni. Take it away, Bruce. You'll need to unmute yourself there. No. Okay. Yeah, Getting used to the Apple, are you, Bruce? Okay. You just got to click on that little red microphone down there in the corner. Not the one on your picture, but the one down in the corner.
By the stop video.
There you go. Oh,
Yeah, okay.
you are. You're good.
Yeah, I finished the book that I was writing on the Clayoquot boot, and I'm a little flabbergasted by the amount of money a guy's going to have to spend if he wants to have it published, self-published. So yeah, we're sitting on it a bit. I'm getting some good advice from Jackie Carmichael, and I'll have to get a hold of her a bit more. Anyway, a couple of short ones. The prologue to the book Clayoquot Boot. My original draft for this book began with the rebuke, "There comes a time when the pressures in life build to a point where, short of a mental emotional breakdown, you feel the need to lash out or try to influence in some manner what is happening. This is a point of powerlessness to control your life's path forward. Your belief in fairness gets ripped away into dust. Over and over during the Clayoquot Sound land use debate, threats for employment rose and fell away, leaving the loggers to feel maybe everything will be okay. However, during the activist protests of the 90s, the reality of job loss and life change was driven home into our reality. Our minds dissolved into distrust and abandonment by all the support we held. Even feelings of hate arose. Raw emotion could even toy with thoughts of how to impress 15 minutes of fame to the world. And what hurt the most, I guess, was the lies. By sharing the story of one ex-Clayoquot Sound forest worker, I hope to help people to understand the issues more fully. At the very least, shed light on some of the contention from the workers versus the environmentalist point of view. For a decade, the forest land use rolled through the media, rising in media hype as speculation for upcoming conflict and violence. All the wise advice to stay in the background, controlling our anger and frustration had been given. Positivity from everyone was clearly given to us. On the subject of reaction, let me tell you about my own struggle to have those 15 minutes of fame in front of the media and the police. Monday, August 9, 93 was the mass arrest day for 300 of the protesters at the Clayoquot blockade. The company informed us in the marshalling yard about the block and how the day would proceed. They could not stop us from doing anything, but the company recommended we keep out of the way. We arrived at the bridge. The approach road was a parking lot of vehicles. We walked to the site to watch for a while. The arrest proceeded. Arrestees were being physically carried to the paddy wagon buses. There were ovations, speeches, epithets supporting the environment. I could feel my frustration building. I could not stay to watch that show. I went back to our bus for a coffee. Staring at my boots, I crafted my attack plan to do something significant for myself and for the crew. All I had to do was light the fuse. I would put on the boots, go to the line, keep right on walking into, over, and through the people. Keep going as far as I can. Hopefully my fellows would come with me. If someone were to interfere, then I guess we could exhaust our frustration by tossing the men out and women out of the way and carrying the youngsters off the road. Whatever, keep going until we break that blockade. I might get arrested. I would have a statement to everyone that I wanted my livelihood. It would show my resolve in a very demonstrative manner. It was a good plan. Dave Stevens came into the bus for a coffee too, and he noticed my work socked feet ready to put on the cork boots he suspected that I was thinking of doing. He acknowledged the plan was a good one, yet advised against it due to the numbers of people, the police and the media. We might lose and look foolish in the pushback. Worse, even to lose our point, we chatted for a while. The rest of the crew started entering the bus. We were ordered by the foreman to go 5 miles back down the road and await the clearance of the bridge. That ended my chance for glory or incarceration, a leader or a fool. I described this recollection to show how easy it seems to snap and do something not really in character. Extreme violence is not out of the question. If I would consider that kind of action, then how many others would lead or follow the lead to violence? As pressures of life began to affect more people over the coming decades, there would be mass shootings, bombings, and unfathomable violence unleashed into the world in an ever-increasing numbers. And a quote attributed to Mother Teresa, if there is no peace in the world, it's because we've forgotten to care for each other. And I'll quote from another historian. The aim of a history, and this history that I have written, is merely to show how things actually were. I have another one, but maybe I should back off for now. Anyway, I'm hoping that I can pursue this book. It come out about 54,000 words, mostly becoming a faller, training as a faller, and then the Clackwood issue and job loss. It was interesting to listen to the thing on retirement. I felt rotten at age 50 in 1998. I got terminated from my job. I had no choice. Anyway, that's what happened. If we have extra time, I got another one.
Yeah, we're getting on here. It's almost 8 o'clock. So, but thanks for that, and an important book, I think, by the sounds of it. You know, timely book. So I hope you're successful with getting that one out there in the world. Jackie's a good person to help you do that, I'm sure.
Yeah, it just frustrates me that you know, if you go self-publishing, they start talking 5 and 10 and 15 and 20,000 bucks.
Yeah, I know, not cheap. All right, you can always do it on Amazon for free, I believe, but then it's an ebook. It's not the same. Okay, our last reader for the night is going to be Rory Rickwood. So, Rory, you look shocked. Karl told me you were going to be reading, so.
Not so much. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. No, it's sort of like a little bit of a discussion around the source of thought. So when you really think about it, we all generate creativity, and I'm blurred right out, but I like that. That's creative. I just wanted to have a discussion. You know, when creative thought evolves from us, what's on the other side of creative thought? What's pushing that thought into our minds? And I sometimes meditate on that and try to get a real thought of where it all comes from. And I just thought I would just create a little bit of a discussion with the group here to see if anyone has some kind of insight that they might like to share. We can build on that. And I'm going to turn to you, Joe. Joe, you have lots of deep thought around society, the mores that guide us. And sometimes, you know, you're either fighting cynicism, I don't know, but I just want to get your discussion on where do your thoughts come from? Back to you, Joe. You're gonna have to put on your mic.
Bob, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, Joe Lunchbucket. Joe, I'm directing it to you. Because I think sometimes when we talk about creativity, this might be healthy for us. So I think you were hearing what I was saying, Joe. And if you click the...
hit your mute button there, Bob, down in the left-hand corner. There we go, a little technical assistance.
There we go. No. Did it work?
Yeah, you're on with us, Joe. So you heard what I...
Okay, I didn't know you were addressing me. What was the question again? Sorry.
Well, you heard what I was saying about creative thought, and that you go into your well of thoughts and feelings and look at society, its mores, its the things that guide us as a society. I listen to you and I feel your emotion. I don't always agree with you, but at the same time, that's the nice thing about us being a collective. It makes it richer when people have different views. And but when it comes to your thoughts, what's driving you? Is it life experiences or?
A lot of it is bad experience, and the other one is just life, going through it. It's all sort of a novelty.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of times when I write something, it's usually on account of something I see in on the news.
Oh, okay. So in looking at the news and the way the world is, how do you fight the cynicism that you might be inside you about what you're seeing?
I just try to write it down. That's about it. I can't fight this. I'm a cynic myself.
Okay.
So your writing is an exercise in exorcising your cynicism.
Yeah. Trying to change the world, but I can't.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to just carry on with Bruce. Bruce, you can hear me. If you could turn your mic on. I see you're waving your hand. So I'm on the same subject, Bruce. I always find it, thank you. I always find it fascinating how our seniors really engage our society and have a lot to share. And I know with your book, you're going to be doing that. I'm much, much younger than yourself, but here I am up at the top of in Holberg and Port McNeill and Kokish, and I'm a rigging slinger, and I'm bringing down logs as big as my living room down a mountain, you know, as a rigging slinger, ordering the chokerman what to do. So I've learned what that's like, you know, that experience. And at the other side, I worked hard respecting why log right up to a stream and take this, you know, there are ways of balancing all this resource extraction and energy that we put into who we are. I don't know if you have some thoughts on that about, again, how we think about these things.
Yeah, I've talked about a couple of chapters in there on what we did.
Oh yeah.
And developed through the 70s and 80s, which was the time I was falling trees. We had a tree puller system for pulling trees away from the rivers.
Okay.
As the faller that makes the initial pass, the influence for me was to make sure I protected that river. So I'm going to do what I can to pull the trees away. There are ways of turning trees. You've heard of Dutchman's, I guess, and the wedging and how to fall them. But the tree puller worked like a hot damn. I never went on it, couldn't fathom the method of doing it. I hated the thought that some line up there has got control of that tree and, you know, it might snap a limb off or break the tree in half and kill me. I just couldn't fathom working on it. But my idea was to keep it away from the river as much as I could and leave whatever was necessary for the puller to do it. And the small trees, the ones that you left them along the river for shade and other features. But yeah, I've discussed various methods that we started to do with fish creeks and that, yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you for sharing. That's these are things that I find really interesting. Another thing that I'd like to explore, I'm going to turn to you a bit, Derek. You know that in Souk, in Port Alberni, but all across the Vancouver Island, if you look up on the hydro lines, you'll see a green helmet waving in the wind up in the things. And you can see it here in Port and down the island highway. Do people know what I'm talking about? Like a green hard hat helmet hanging on the guy lines. No.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, well, you know the little bridge just down by the Beaver Creek Road as it turns off? If you look up, you'll see a helmet up there. So I made the inquiry, but I've seen them, now that I know what to look for, I've seen a half a dozen. So I made a call into someone that works for Hydro. And you know what it is? It's actually a wonderful Canadiana story. And it's the person who's an electrician who's, what do you call the early electricians that aren't an electrician yet, the journeyman?
Oh, yeah.
Apprentice.
Okay, yeah, so by the time they get their white helmet, they can retire their green helmet up onto the power lines on the very last power line they work on. And when you think about it, that's a wonderful little story. It's siloed with their little industry, but these things happen all across Canada. And it would be wonderful to capture all these kind of stories across Canada that are there, but not captured, put it in a book and call it our indelible tapestry. and just have fun with it, because people would write their own stories along those lines. So I just think it would be nice to capture what's really part of who we are as Canadians, and we don't know all these little stories. I'm just going to end there. That that there's more to write about is really what I'm saying. Okay. Thanks, you,
Rory. Thanks for bringing that up and poking our thoughts about that. And yeah, definitely there's a book could be written in that for sure. Some of the Canadian eccentricities around the industries in this country. We got to wrap it up here now. It's almost 8 o'clock, and I just want to say a few things before we go, and that's big thank yous to everybody who read tonight, and especially to our featured readers, but also to the open micers and to those who joined us to just listen. And huge thank you to Char at Char's Landing, and where the Electric Mermaid is perched in the rafters there. We're always grateful to her and all she does for this. And just a reminder, if you're feeling generous, e-transfer at charslanding.com is always open 24 hours a day. Keep those lights on. They'll be much appreciated. Big shout out to Karl, our moderator, for looking after us as well, and to Jackie Carmichael, who wasn't with us tonight, but she's our artistic director who lines up featured readers and everything else. And yeah, so thank you so much for coming out, everybody. Keep writing. We'll be meeting next month on the 3rd Friday of the month again, whatever date that is. I'm thinking it's probably around the 18th or the 17th, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. Karl will put 16th. It in there. 16th?
The 16th.
16th. There we go. I was close. So in the meantime, everybody stay safe and keep writing, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month.
Oh, Derek, I was so looking forward to you sharing some words with us.
Yeah, please read.
Please.
I don't want to keep everybody up late.
Oh, it's okay.
Time for you.
Derek, you could do it. You got everybody on the island still on, so it's okay.
And Karl, next time put Derek up at the top, because I so look forward to hearing your words, your inspirations. So please.
Please read, Derek.
I'll share a short poem here that I've been working on the last week or so. It's called Industrial Arts. It's childhood memory coming through here. For that, we rode a bus to a different middle school where the brush-cutted instructor rolled back the sleeves of his blue smock, flexed his forearms, and explained that with the cost of materials, nothing was wasted in his shop. And there was a price exacted for horseplay. At best, a few moments airborne towards the door, conveniently closed. At worst, a pair of fingers swept into the sawdust bin, and a lifetime spent avoiding handshakes. We listened then, and posted guards at the finishing room door, took turns inhaling solvents, got wasted just to prove him wrong. Later, my hand shook as I struggled to jigsaw a hexagon from a piece of pine for a plant stand that ended lopsided, wobbly, and sanded to a wedge. Flipping it over in his hand, the teacher chewed his bottom lip, measured its 3 dimensions, and granted me a D. My mother declared it a work of art as she peeled away the tissue paper stuck to the lacquer finish, the thinner for which had splashed up Jeffrey Weeder's nose when the bus hit a bump. The same day he quit being able to recite Shakespeare, and I started reading Romeo and Juliet. But time proved the teacher right. Nothing was wasted in his shop, and horseplay exacted its price. Jeffrey became a bank manager while I succumbed to poetry, which I draft with the eyes of my mother. and revise with a tape measure in hand, knowing no amount of lacquer can hide a shoddy base, just as a well-built one can't make up for a lack of polish. There we go. Thank you, thank you. Okay, you can all go now.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you to Bonnie and David for staying on.
Yes.
And for supporting Char and supporting for Vicki too.
Yes. Thanks for everyone who.
Thank you,
came.
Bonnie and David.
All right. Take care, all. Good night.
Nice to meet all of you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mickey. Come again, please.
Thank you very much. Good.
Okay. Thank you for saying bye.
Bye-bye. Make us a habit. It's a good one. Good night, Rory. Take care, man.
Hey, Rory, are you my friend Derek's brother by any chance?
Yes, yes, I am.
Oh,
I'm the oldest of 6, so there's I've got 4 sisters, and my mother's writes books, as you know, or maybe not know.
Yes, I do. I met her.
Yes, yes. So I'm yes, part of
nice
that.
to meet you.
Thank you. Okay, good to see everybody. Thank you.
Take care, Rory.
Bye.
Bye.
Wonderful to see all the connections tonight. It's
Yeah,
lovely.
everyone's
Thank
connected
you.
somewhere along the
Good night.
lines.
Thank you, Derek.
All right,
Really-
Sharp. Thank you. Take care.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good
night.
night,
Char.
Char. Night, Derek. Night,
Good to
Karl.
see you.
Good night.
Night, Joe Lunchbucket.